Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up-to-date political, economic and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Okay, happy Monday everybody. I hope you all had a relaxing weekend. First up, let's discuss key economic and financial developments from the last few days. Last week we examined China's disappointing manufacturing PMI for May. Today, Monday, the Caixin China General Services Business Activity Index, also known as the Services PMI, which gives an independent snapshot of the services sector in the country, was published. And the findings were even worse than the manufacturing PMI. According to the index, services activity in China shrank for the third straight month in the month of May, though not as severely as the previous month, with 41.4 in May from 36.2 in April. We remember that a number above 50 indicates an expansion of activity, while a figure below this number means a contraction. The Caixin China Manufacturing PMI for May, released last Wednesday, was 48.1, indicating a large gap between manufacturing and services in the economy. We learned then, too, that employment also shrank for the fifth straight month in May. Quote, "Overall in May, local COVID outbreaks continued and manufacturing and services activity improved slightly, but continued to contract, with services hit harder. The damage from the latest wave of domestic outbreaks may surpass that of 2020. End quote. With these numbers, it's no surprise that local governments continue to roll out stimulus measures to arrest the slowdown the crisis-hit economy is experiencing in the face of lockdowns and zero-COVID measures. One popular measure authorities are turning to is supporting car sales. Car sales are viewed by some as an important economic indicator of market health and a proxy for consumer demand. The industry has been hit hard with lockdowns. We remember that car sales fell by more than 60% back in April. Unsurprisingly, Shanghai's sales dropped over 99%, according to the Shanghai Automobile Sales Industry Association. The central government has already announced that it will cut the purchase tax for selected cars by half for the remainder of the year, with the total planned reductions totaling 60 billion yuan or $9 billion US. Subsidies to encourage residents in smaller cities to buy new energy vehicles have also been expanded. However, some analysts have questioned the effectiveness of these measures for the economy. For example, over the weekend, Goldman Sachs and Research Note expressed, quote, "We believe the overall magnitude of these locally based measures is small, as not all cities can afford such consumption stimulus packages." End quote. Harry Hu, chief China economist at Macquarie Group, agrees, expressing last week that the car purchase tax cut, quote, "helps on the margin, but is too small to move the needle." End quote. This is yet another sign that while China is facing a dual supply-side, demand-side hit, it's on the demand side where regulators have their biggest challenges. This shouldn't be a surprise, though. Before the crises of the 2020 Wuhan lockdown, the Evergrande crash, and now the zero-COVID lockdowns, regulators had been trying for years to rebalance the economy more towards demand. And now the demand environment is worse than ever. We remember from last week that China's official consumer sentiment fell to the worst levels since records have been available back in 1991. We will be returning to this ongoing issue of demand as we look at the housing market later this week. But for now, one more economic development that touches on US-China relations and the US economy too. Yesterday, Sunday, US Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo said that the US president had directed his team to explore lifting some tariffs imposed on China during the Trump era as a tool to mitigate high inflation, expressing, quote, "There are other products, household goods, bicycles, etc., and it may make sense." End quote. She made it clear, however, that tariffs on steel and aluminium, or aluminum as I think it's pronounced in North America, would not be relaxed. So far, the Biden administration has maintained hundreds of billions of dollars of tariffs placed on Chinese goods from the Trump administration. Next up, Chinese energy policy and developments. If you guys enjoyed the episode, don't forget to hit the like button. And for anyone who wants to go the extra mile and help keep this channel sustainable and subscriber supported, Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, and crypto links are in the description below. As always, thank you to everybody everybody for your ongoing support. Okay, China's biggest oil and gas producer, the massive state-run China National Petroleum Corp, has announced that it will shift half of its output to hydrogen, geothermal energy, and clean power by 2050 in order to contribute to meeting China's 2060 carbon neutrality goals. Analysts with Tariffs point out that the company, which is the parent company of PetroChina, has so far trailed European oil companies in spending on its energy transition, with PetroChina spending $330 million on new energy in 2021 versus the over $2 billion which Shell spends and plans on increasing to $3 billion over the next few years. Another giant, Sinopec, is also aiming at reaching net zero emissions by 2050, although these targets don't include emissions from the fuels they sell. The China National Petroleum Corp also plans to extend its efforts through 2035 to cut emissions of methane. Now, these are all just commitments at this point. We need to wait and see whether they will follow through with them. Meanwhile, in an example of one step forward, two steps back, China's 14th five-year plan for renewable energy has seen a small change in wording from previous language that will likely increase the country's space for more new coal power generation, a trend that most analysts have been expecting. In March 2021, the National Energy Administration of the country said that renewables would account for 2/3 of the increase in electricity consumption through 2025. However, with the current five-year plan document, this has now been changed to 50% of incremental power consumption growth during the 2021 to 2025 period. So expect more coal and coal burning on the way. Now, last up, let's turn to COVID and the situation in Shanghai. Less than a week into opening up, Shanghai authorities have detected fresh community infections of COVID, forcing local health authorities to warn the recently liberated city that a resurgence of COVID-19 could mean many more lockdowns. City officials had aimed to return life and work to normal by the end of this month. However, on yesterday, the financial megacity's health commissioner told a press conference that new cases in the city could spread quickly if immediate actions are not taken to cut the transmission chains, expressing, quote, "The community infections we spotted in recent days were scattered across the city, likely to trigger a resurgence of the outbreak. We must be highly alert to virus transmission risk." End quote. As of this morning, total community infections since the official reopening on June 1st is only 13, officially. But even this small number will be making trigger-happy local officials nervous. There is incredible political pressure on them to not repeat a disastrous citywide lockdown. Quote, "Shanghai cannot afford a second round of citywide lockdown since thousands of local companies have already been hit hard and could slash jobs to avoid big losses. City officials will try their best to put the pandemic under full control over the next 2 weeks." End quote. 2 residential compounds where the new Sunday cases were discovered have been reclassified from open to medium risk areas. All residents in these compounds are now required to re-enter a state of lockdown and stay in their homes once again for at least 14 days. The risk of a similar fate is hanging over the heads of all Shanghai residents now, where a stroke of bad luck means a return to lockdowns. The effects of this risk alone on economic and mental health could be sizable. Putting aside these new cases and lockdowns, though, now that Shanghai is opening back up, some domestic commentators are beginning to reflect on the lockdown from many angles, though perhaps shying away from some of the more political or sensitive ones. One concern raised in recent days, for example, is the fragility of China's health system. We remember that over 50,000 health workers from across the country, including from the military, were deployed to Shanghai to assist in carrying out testing, treating patients, and managing quarantine facilities, along with other duties. The fact that Shanghai, the most developed city in mainland China, and with top medical resources, still needed large-scale medical help to overcome the COVID surge is a red flag. Indeed, even with this extra support in finances and manpower, the health system could not function properly, as hospitals were closed, including accident and emergency service departments. Another question being raised, albeit more cautiously, is the legality of local government bylaws in response to COVID. and some aspects of the social contract between state and people. Obviously, this conversation is constrained to a large extent. Nevertheless, it has manifested itself in interesting ways. For example, last week the local government of the northeastern city of Siping, SIPING, revoked a notice that said residents who miss more than 2 mandatory COVID tests will be administratively detained, fined, and blacklisted, after receiving a huge backlash online. The measures had already been in place for half a month when they were reversed. Within 48 hours, the hashtag Ciping in Jilin province deleted the notice that says people who fail to take citywide nucleic acid tests more than 2 times will be detained and fined. So it's quite a long hashtag, topped the trending list on Weibo, receiving over 4 million views. Interestingly, the thrust of the online criticism, which pushed the local authorities to revoke the measures, was whether the measures were legal and constitutional. Even domestic outlets like the Economic Observer joined in the criticism, writing, quote, "Individuals need to cooperate with the government for the public good. However, this does not mean that the government can institute harsh, ad hoc punishments for individuals who do not cooperate." End quote. In the past, online criticism has either been very muted, or if it is of local government measures, was normally about the unjustness or unfairness of a particular policy, rather than a deeper discussion of procedural legality or constitutionalism. Shanghai is home to many of the economic, intellectual, and cultural elite of the country. After 2 months of a harsh and at times badly mismanaged lockdown, perhaps we will see a growing awareness of the importance of legal procedural constraints on local decision makers among these elites. Maybe. We will see. But for now, that is today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you tomorrow.